Quick show of hands though first. I'm not expecting many people to know the name Guidance Software, but can I have a quick show of hands for people who know Encase, please? Marvellous, and as I hoped. So this deck is essentially, sorry, let's go back, is about understanding the importance of your endpoints. Probably like many of you, I spent many years working as a perimeter guy. When I got to this firm about 3 years ago, I had no kind of concept of the concept of digital forensics and why that is important to the world of cyber. For those few people that didn't put their hands up in the room in terms of knowing Encase, if you see a law enforcement officer or sometimes your own HR departments with a computer or a BlackBerry or an iPhone in an evidence bag, chances are that is going to be encased, the results of which will be presented in court or whatever judiciary is. So that's kind of the world that we come from. So really, given my points about perimeter, it's about how can, we see a lot of this because we get involved in so many of these incidents, many of those big ones, the Target one, for example, we're in there because we're the forensic people, we're the last people in, we are the people that do the mopping up, we're the people that help our customers understand what root cause really was. And frustratingly for us, the endpoint is often the last piece of the puzzle. And actually, the purpose of this deck, and I promise you I will fly through them, there are only 14 slides in total anyway, the purpose of this deck is to kind of try and align some of that thinking about trying to keep the barbarians out at the gate and accept that they're already in. And actually how you can use your endpoint estates and the intelligence from them to actually build a better security vector than you've kind of currently got. So essentially what I'm going to do is just really take you through a plan that covers across, and my glasses, I can't look at that and this at the same time, age. And we're going to cover across really 5 kind of key topics. So one is know yourself, one is detect, one is respond, one is recover, and the last one, as you probably all know, is repeat. So we'll tick those through, and I will kind of grab probably one of the most salient points from each of those slides so that we can all get to coffee and toilet breaks. So first thing, know yourself. We see this again and again and again. We go and we talk to organisations, large and small, and we start asking poignant questions, such as, where's your data? If you have a breach and you can identify it to XYZ point of machines, do you know what was on those machines? Do you know what was actually exfiltrated? And surprisingly, a lot of our customers don't. So that's probably the big call out from that side. And of course, the bottom point about having a plan. Again, we turn up at, we will go and have an initial meeting and surprisingly mature organisations. And one of the first questions we will ask at the top of the meeting, what's your incident response plan? It happens all the time. And actually, it's kind of scary, really reassuring to hear that kind of central government, MOD, and the points that Mike made this morning, that's being addressed at kind of a CP and I-like level. But we need to take those kind of same lessons and apply it to our organisation. So I promised I'd step through them. Start your plan. Once you've got a plan, you kind of need to baseline. So, again, understand what's out there. So understand what endpoints you've got. We've got an engagement with one of the big banks at the moment, and we're asking them. And the reality is they can't even tell us. They can't even tell us how many endpoints they've got. It's a variation. It might be 150,000, but it could be as high as 175,000. You've got 25,000 devices that you don't know exactly where they are, what they're doing. Really? But again, this is kind of common fodder. So you guys need a baseline. Again, I'll kind of skip through, and you can see product shots. For those of you that are Encase kind of fiends, you'll see some product shots here, but I'm not really here to talk about product. So once you've got a baseline, look for where the holes are. You'll have some blind spots. Might be a particular flavour of server that is running a particularly interesting operating system, and nobody else has got anything that kind of covers that element of your estate. Now that's fine. If you can't cover it, you can't cover it, but at least accept and recognise and know that those devices aren't covered. Yeah, it's talking about checking the policies from the plan. So kind of, the whole point of having that plan is that's an organic thing. You keep going back to it. There was a lot of talk about the cyber essential stuff, and there was reference to the fact that this is point in time. We would suggest that this needs to be, it can't be point in time. You can't have this as a snapshot, because what was right yesterday might not be right today. So understand where your blind spots are, and then of course kind of build your own little RAG report or risk register, so that actually you understand what portions of your estate, ideally you would understand what type of data you are holding on those. Is there critical intellectual property for our organisation on this? Am I a drugs manufacturer that's taken 20 years to develop some seriously powerful IP? What would be the cost if I lost that 2 days before product release? It's just unthinkable. So fill the gaps. And then we start kind of moving into the detect phase. So kind of our, the traditional NCASE world. So, firstly, look for your unknowns. So hopefully there isn't an organisation in the room that is not running AV. AV is fantastic. It's very different from kind of our world. It's about protecting from threats rather than how you respond to them afterwards. But that's why we're saying go with the unknown threats first. Most senior IT sec people, again, that we see in our day job, the one thing they want to know about a potential threat up front is, was this designed for me, my organisation, or is this generic? If it's generic, do you know what? I'll let AV handle it, and that's fine. But actually, if this stuff hasn't got a signature, and if it looks like it was socially engineered to drop to some very specific people in our organisation, that's the stuff that I want to know about. So actually, if you have total visibility on what your endpoints are doing, what your whole estate is doing, then you can start looking for those unknowns. So detect the knowns, we kind of covered that, so this is one of those, we'll save 2 minutes. But typical stuff, some of this stuff was talked about earlier, hash values, MD5 hashing, that type of stuff. Entropy is an interesting one. It's where a lot of the signature-based stuff is kind of falling down, because actually if you start looking for MD5 hash XYZ on endpoint A, actually by the time you get to endpoint C, it's got a different MD5 hash. So something in your infrastructure, you need to be able to determine how this stuff is moving and what sort of lateral movement is happening on your networks. So detect the nodes. Now we start to get to the respond. And this is a really interesting thing. So I mentioned this kind of difference between the traditional endpoint world and the traditional perimeter world. We see again on the day-to-day that there are new teams emerging. There used to be a forensic guy that sat kind of sub-basement on -5, and he was kind of shut in a little room cupboard. He was our traditional NCASE customer. He'd probably been a policeman. And then we used to see the NetSec boys, kind of in my old world, the perimeter guys, big budgets. But actually, what we've now seen is that kind of network security as a team and those kind of forensic endpoint guys have merged together. So we see cyber defense operations, or cyber this, or cyber that. And effectively, it's a merger of those traditional perimeter network guys and the traditional endpoint kind of teams. Because you have to look at kind of both things. In order to fix this, you can't ignore the network, but equally you can't ignore the endpoint either. So endpoint response technology, whether that's ours or somebody else's, the more that you can automate that and integrate that with your perimeter, and as this kind of graphic alludes to, the whole point of that is, if your inline malware boxes for whichever vendor you run, if they say, generate an alert, send this to your SIM, and then you need a SOC analyst to go and look at the SIM and actually determine, there's a whole load of stuff there that can kind of fall through gaps. So actually, if you can automate it, so you can say your inline malware box, it still notifies your SIM, but actually at the same time that it notifies your SIM that you've got a potential issue, it actually kicks off with a piece of endpoint work, goes and grabs a snapshot of that endpoint and says, well, actually, here are the running processes, at this particular time. Here are the running processes. Here's what's in memory. Here's a look at the master file table. When that SOC analyst gets to that alert in your SIM, he's actually got all the information he needs to determine whether all he needs to do is right-click, false positive, add to policy, nothing to worry about, or actually, like the target guys, I think we've got a big problem here. So he's got all the information he needs to actually go and do what he needs to do. Because, of course, the security professionals in the room, we probably all know that actually if that user had phoned a help desk, the first thing they're going to get told is pull the power cable out, which for us as incident responders, we've lost all the most interesting stuff. So if you can automate that, that's a big step in the right direction. Remote investigations, I won't talk about that, because of the show of hands of Encase, and thank you for that. So, using Encase or something else, and again, as I just kind of talked about in that case study, go and have a look at those devices or those infected devices. What's really going on? Does what those devices tell you actually match what the network has told you? If not, why not? Questions? Malware analysis, just joked about this, don't pull the power cable out because then actually you've lost everything that was, all the volatile data in memory, that's really what you need. Whether you, again, do it with our stuff or whether you've got your own, as we're seeing actually, many of the bigger organisations, particularly in financial services, actually have 2 or 3 guys now who are proper propellerheads, and their job is just to poke sticks at malware all day. Great job. Determine scope. This is a real big one, and I would actually kind of like to kind of dwell on this one. When we ask questions about customers' incident response plans, and they're vague and woolly, as they so often are, this is often one of the questions, one of the kind of things that we will kind of go on to. We'll say, okay, so you haven't got a proper incident response plan? No, Ian, we haven't, sorry. Well, actually, do you know how you're, if you've lost, for example, in health some patient data, or in retail some PII, some credit card data, you need to determine the scope. Now, for my US brethren, we're a US firm, they have an obligation over there. If there's a data breach, whether it's 20 records or 20 million records, they have to report. Currently in the EU, we don't have the same onus on us. But actually, if I'm the CIO or the CEO of an organisation, it's going to be one of the first questions I ask. The CISO comes to me and says, well, we've had a data breach. Well, what's gone? Well, I'm not sure. Well, what do you mean you're not sure? Well, we think it might be customer records. Oh, okay. How many? It's going to be my next question. You need to understand the scope, and this kind of all ties back to some of those earlier messages. And obviously the impact of that scope question on sensitive data. So Remediate, again, traditional kind of Encase bread and butter. We can isolate those processes. We can isolate that nasty stuff on whatever disks, on how many of endpoints, and whether it's us or somebody else, could be just AV. Press the Remediate button, get rid of it. For those of you who can't see, there's a little tag in here, create remediation job. It's one of the things that some of our portfolio does. And for those that are interested, please come and see us at the stand. So we're now into a recovery phase. We want to verify that actually if we've remediated those risks, those issues, whatever it might have been, we actually need to verify that we truly have got rid of them. So we talked about a process that, an Encase kind of phrase, we talked about snapshotting. If I've got a snapshot from before, I'll run a snapshot after, because actually I want to check that none of that nasty stuff that was running in memory is still running. I want to check that those files were forensically erased from disk, overwritten with 1s and 0s, can't come back again, that my registry keys have been reset, so on and so forth. So it's kind of the verification and update piece, which should feed to this piece, the data enrichment piece. And this is another kind of forgotten step that we often see, is that actually when you have an incident everyone goes crazy, hair on fire, we will respond to the incident, we deal with it. Fortunately, we didn't lose anything major, we identified root cause properly. Let's make sure that we feed this back in, because all the lessons that we've learned during that process need to go right back into the plan at the beginning of the presentation. So we're almost there now. Repeat, final step. So apologies, it was a bit of a rush job. I hope as you're all standing up queuing for coffee that you appreciate that we rushed it for you. And for any of you that want a little bit more detail or want to have a longer conversation, we've got 3 or 4 guys on a stand out there who'll be happy to help you. So thank you for listening.